Today, we rank our extinct cousins in the ultimate human species tier list. Now, believe it or not, there are between 50 to 30 differently named human species that have been alive on this planet. And some of our ancestors were absolute beasts, and some of them just weren't. And yes, there was genuinely a little dwarf species of human that battled dragons. So how do we stack up against all these Temu versions of ourselves? Before we dive in, the word human gets a little bit messy. Now technically the word human means any species that belongs to our genus, Homo. But even the scientists argue all the time about what actually classifies as a human species or just a variation of a different one. And it doesn't help that early humans were pretty freaky and did a lot of interbreeding. At one time, on the Earth's existence, there were 5 species of humans all interacting, doing their thing. If you like this content, please give me a like and subscribe. First up, we have Homo florensiensis. Now they lived anywhere from 100 to 50,000 years ago. They lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia. At only 1 meter tall, around 25 kilos, and rocking a brain about the size of a chimp's, a third the size of ours, they were not impressive specimens. Despite their tiny brains, they have been seen to have made tools, and they are a confusing mix of ancient and more modern traits in human species. Even from the experts, there is huge debate about how this species came about. A potential explanation is they are an example of island dwarfism. On islands, evolution gets weird fast because there is no predators, there is limited gene mixing and limited resources. So why did this push them to become small? Well, they didn't really need much energy being that small, and brains are expensive to run. A brain takes anywhere from 400 to 500 calories to run a day, which is about 20% of your overall daily metabolism. But the brain only weighs 2% of your body mass. And if resources on your island are already limited, you don't really have any predators to worry about, but you do have lots of competition for food, it makes sense to be small, have a smaller brain, and be overall more energy efficient. And these little humans were sharing their island with some pretty extreme animals. One of them is Leptoptilos robustus, which was basically a giant stork species, and they were sharing it with Komodo dragons. And I honestly just absolutely love the idea that there genuinely could have been humans alive on this planet battling dragons. And there is even fossil evidence of this happening because Komodo dragon bones and Homo florensiensis bones have been found together in caves where they lived. Let's be real, if you're getting bodied by what's essentially a giant seagull twice your size, you're going in the F tier. Next up, we have a species known as Homo naledi. One of the strangest things about Homo naledi is how recent they are, having such primitive features and being one of the earliest human species to have evolved. Now they had small brains, a small stature, and they had very curved fingers, which suggested that they were still very good climbers. But they still had some very confusing, more modern features like humans as well. One example of this is that they were thought to have buried their dead, which was once thought to be unique to humans, us, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. And they were actually alive on the planet at the same time as Homo sapiens, but their features remained basically unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years, and so they kind of just hung on to that primitive nature. So they're basically an evolutionary mystery, and so they go into the D tier for just doesn't quite fit anywhere. Next we're moving on to a species known as Homo habilis, the handyman. Now they lived around 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago and are again one of the earliest examples of the human Homo genus. They had a small body, being only up to about 4 foot tall. They still had very long arms and they still had curved fingers, showing that they were partly still good climbers. But they were a huge evolutionary step forward, having larger brains than other early hominins. They crafted simple stone tools, flakes, choppers, scrapers, to butcher meat, crack bones for marrow, and process plant material. And this represents a massive step towards more human-like behaviour, with tool use being vital to our success, as it allows us to access and manipulate the environment far more than we ever could before. So because of that, they're important, and they're going in a C tier. Next up, we're moving on to Australopithecus. Now, I'm cheating a little bit here because they're not really a true Homo species. You could say they are pre-Homo, but they are too important to leave out. They lived around 4.2 to 2 million years ago, and they are basically the bridge from ape-like ancestors to human-like ancestors. And they are pretty much the ancestor to all modern human species. Now, they didn't use tools like Homo species, and they still had a mostly vegetarian diet, again very similar to chimps. But their bipedalism was an absolute game changer. The most famous fossil is called Lucy, and it showed that they actually walked upright on two legs. They were only about 3.7 feet tall. They had very long arms, they had small brains, still about the size of a chimp, but they still had curved fingers, and so it showed that they still spent plenty of time in the trees. Lucy was such a fascinating fossil to help us understand our evolution, and it represents that transitional stage between ape-like ancestors and humans so well. Now, these fossils show that walking on two legs was the modern human trait which came first over developing larger brains, and it set the stage for everything else. So Australopithecus lands a solid B tier for being the OGs that paved the way. Next up, we have Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals. Now, they lived anywhere from 400,000 to 40,000 years ago across Europe and Western Asia. Picture a stocky, muscular build. They were 20% heavier than Homo sapiens, with bones sometimes twice as dense, bigger chests, broader shoulders, big triceps, giant brow ridges, basically the beefcakes of the human family tree. They were built for power and speed. They needed way more calories than us to survive, and so they became the apex predators of their time. Now, 74 to 90% of discovered remains show traumatic injury, from skull fractures to amputations and broken bone. These guys were fighting giant Paleolithic predators. They were fighting each other, and they were hunting giant Paleoloxodon weighing up to 13 tons. One fossil, named Shanindar 1, showed an individual who received a crushing blow to the eye/head, likely causing brain damage and blindness. He had bony growths in both of his ears from repeated injuries and healings, and he had a missing forearm. He also had a fractured and healed foot. What an absolute beast. Some of our species can barely even cook their own bloody pot noodle, let alone hunting giant 13-ton elephants. Neanderthals even made sophisticated tools, they buried their dead, and they possibly created art. They even had brains that were bigger than ours. But it is thought that most of that was devoted to their eyes, which were on average 15% bigger than Homo sapiens. But based on studies of their skulls, their vocal tract was a different shape to humans, and so their language was probably very primitive. So they really are the stereotypical caveman that we all know. But how did these superpowered apex predators actually go extinct? Their disappearance is extremely closely related to the time that Homo sapiens started to appear, and so one very likely theory is that we simply outcompeted them. Neanderthals were energetically costly to move and to feed. They were big, they were strong, they were great at producing body heat, but all of this means that their survival was hard, as they needed more energy and more food than we did. And when a arguably more clever and more energy efficient competitor, us, comes in and competes, we just simply outcompeted them. But don't worry, these evolutionary superhumans aren't gone. They did a lot of interbreeding with Homo sapiens, and so humans outside of Africa have anywhere from 1 to 3% of their DNA being Neanderthal DNA. So because of all of that, these absolute beasts are definitely going in the A tier. And to finish up, we have two truly S tier human species, and one of them is Homo sapiens, us. We have been around for nearly 300,000 years, and we are the only surviving human species, which is one of the main reasons we are in the S tier. We've got the high forehead, unfortunately some of us more than others, the rounded skull, we've got less prominent brow ridges, and weirdly, we're the only species with a prominent chin. Who knew? But our brains are really what put us in the S tier. We invented advanced tools like 6-foot spears with tips. We invented spear throwers, bows and arrows. We made art, we have language. We figured out how to work as a team better than any other human species. We even mastered the use of fire. And our secret weapon was basically the way we hunted, persistence hunting. We basically just jogged animals down over long distances until they died. Neanderthals, for example, might have been stronger, but we were marathon runners with big complex brains developing complex hunting strategies. Our body structures and upright bipedal walking allowed us to hunt incredibly effectively, and mixed with our far superior brains, we simply outcompeted and survived better than any other human species. And last but by no means least, Homo erectus, a true S tier human and an absolute stand-up guy. Get it? Stand up, erect. Nicknamed the Upright Man, they were the first human species to leave Africa, which paved the way for the global spread and domination of all other human species. They lived from about 1.9 million years ago to 110,000 years ago, making them the most long-living and dominant human species to have ever existed. And for context, that's 5 times longer than humans, Homo sapiens, have been around on the planet. Physically, they were around 5 to 6 feet tall. They had shorter arms, longer legs, and a robust muscular build. They're often referred to as the first truly human species because their body shape and behaviour was so much like ours. This was perfect for endurance running and long distance travel on the ground rather than swinging in the trees. And this shows our transition from tree-based lifestyles to ground-based lifestyles. Homo erectus were among the earliest humans to master meat eating, skilled tool making, and crucially, the control of fire. This was a vital stage because it allowed us to start cooking food, and cooking food allows you to extract far more nutrients and calories from the food. This fueled our bigger developing brains, allowed us to survive better, and paved the way for evolution. As an absolute evolutionary trailblazer, and possibly one of our direct ancestors, in my opinion, Homo erectus truly deserves their spot at the top of our human tier list. So there you have it, the human species tier list. From hobbits battling dragons, to Neanderthals smashing skulls, and then to us here binge watching YouTube. Evolution's wild ride proves one thing: it's not about being the smartest or the strongest, it's about surviving best in your environment.